So this week, our assignments in the class I'm taking is on rendering. The first assignment that's already completed was on the physical renderer, and the one that we're working on now is using Redshift. So I thought I'd like to talk to you about my experience, and I think you can benefit. Okay, hopefully you can. Okay, so the one that we had been working with is the physical renderer, and this is how this is set up. Now, it is quite sophisticated in terms of you can even have node based materials, but it is slow. Uh, Although before I forget, it is free. It does come in terms of it does come with cinema, but it is slow. Um, so the main thing to know if you're working with a physical renderer, first and most important thing, is if you want to see what it's going to look like, you have to use the interactive render region. But before you do that, you got to make sure that your settings here are on progressive. Okay, so because otherwise and I wasn't thinking about this for some time, and I tried to look at a little bitty piece and it would take literally minutes just to look at like a little square here. So we have it on progressive, and I think it is Alt R, and you can see what it's doing. It is rendering the screen, and you can see the reflections and so on. And of course, we have pretty hard reflections the way this is set up right now. And of course, it has lights. Now, you use what they call the sun to get that overall, like if you, overall light effect. And then you have your different lights. This is a top light. This is the left light, and this is the right light. Let me kill the interactive renderer here and show you. So here are my lights. There's also one you can't see necessarily. It's up here. And I made them kind of big. You can adjust intensity. You cannot adjust exposure. So this is the physical renderer, and I mean, if you looked at interactive render region, it wasn't bad. Now, okay, so now let's take a look at Redshift. Redshift has its own IPR, its own where you can view a progressive render of your entire image, and it's very quick, very fast. Let me make it start from scratch, and you can see how quickly it renders. Now, this gives us a chance to see how we're doing here. And you can see the whole thing very quickly. Whereas the physical render does let you, use progressive interactive render, which will let you see a portion of your items with portion of your scene very quickly. But this is slower. Now I'm going to show you, and let me talk about my set. I did use the dome light because they have a dome light, which is usually used instead of the sun. This is also where you can put a, if you want to use an HDRI, you can stick it, I think it's in here under texture. So you can do that if you wish. And the camera has its own additional tags. that you can control bokeh, you can control, you know, a whole bunch of things here. Whereas if we go back to here, let's look at I'm sure I looks like I don't have a camera. So let's put one in. So we're going to create a camera, just a regular camera for our scene. And now, and I may have mentioned this before, I think I'd mentioned in the last video, one little trick so you don't ruin your camera is you do this rigging tag called protection. And we want to do that on both, because this way, if you stop moving things around when the camera is on, it's not going to let you. Okay. So there you go. Always want to do that. Now it looks also like we don't have the optimum rendering set up yet because you're still getting this here. So you can edit that, and of course you have Redshift. You can add some, maybe another more to reflection, shadows. We want shadows. We can do hardware ray tracing. There's separate things for global illumination. This is a good setting for that. Generally, brute force and interactive point cloud. They call it something different in, let's see what they call it in the physical. What do they call it? Let's see. I believe it is called, like something with initials, and this may be with the lights. Let's check the lights here. Shadow. Oh no, that's different. So this is where you can convert a standard light to a redshift light. Let's see. In global illumination, which I don't know if you can control it. Let's see. Sampler. Depth of field advanced. So you can adjust your different like shadow depth and thresholds and things like that, which will reduce shadowing, reduce the make the shadows look better. And going back to the Redshift renderer, of course you have a lot of controls here. And like I said, you have similar things in the physical. So I did some tests, and what I discovered for this particular scene that we're looking at, and the one's almost exact scene, or the exact scene, in using the physical renderer, the physical render was actually quite fast. Now, that's not going to be your experience if you're doing things with a number of items in the scene, if you got your metals and glass and complex textures and things. My experience has been that Redshift is much, much faster. Now, one thing you have to be aware of with rendering, and in particular with Redshift, a lot comes down to your settings. You're balancing the cleanness of the image versus the time it's going to take. Do you want motion blur? How do you get the motion blur? How good is it going to look versus, again, the time? Because you're always, in rendering, you're often trading within a particular renderer time for quality of the image. So it depends on a lot of things. Obviously, if you have a 600 frame or 1200 frame animation, that's going to, you have to consider speed a bit more than if you're doing just a one frame render that you want focus on the prettiest render you can get. That's a different thing. There are things like motion blur that if you're animating is going to be important. It is not going to be relevant to that. So trying to test these two really wasn't an accurate test. I'd say if you're doing anything serious, you're going to want to look at the third-party renderers because they give you a lot more. I mean, just the fact with this Redshift that you have its own little render view that's very fast, automatically knows to do progressive when you're looking at things, and changes things on the fly. Like here, I could turn around and decide, I don't like these shadows. And so maybe you'll do something like, let's see. I think one thing you might be able to do is add a little improvement on your global illumination. And it should get a little bit cleaner. There's also, actually, where is that sampling? Okay, so here's your sampling. Maybe you want to get rid of automatic and change your sample max to 70 or 66. Let's pick a number. And so it can throw more rays at the image and hopefully clean it up. And there are other things you can do. I don't know how much that helped, but you get the idea. I believe that the third-party renderers do provide value if you're working on this stuff on. Believe that the third-party renderers do provide value if you're working on this stuff on a regular basis. Octane's another one that's quite good. Some people like that. Again, that's what's called a unbiased renderer, which takes some of the control out of your hands. In return, it makes it by requiring settings that are going to make it more realistic. So it limits in terms of if you want to do something more cartoony or something that, where you're not so concerned about realism, that's where Octane may be a little bit of a disadvantage to Redshift, which will let you get away with that kind of stuff. Another thing, also, one thing I learned when I took the original class is with lights. Let me see if I can find a light here. So when you go into a Redshift light, you can also change your light samples. And generally what I remember learning is that if you increase the light samples, it can improve your grain without as much of a hit in terms of render time than going in general improving, increasing your samples. So that's another thing you can try. But Anyway, so to sum everything up, physical render will work, but if you get into complex scenes or animations, not ideal. And we saw what kind of a render it can put out. Um, the third-party renderers do cost money. Uh, I think Redshift's about $23 a month paid on an annual contract, and I think Octane's somewhere around 16, $17 a month on an annual contract. And but they give you that speed, and they give you more options, and also it's a tool for the job. If you're going for photorealism and you need to pump things out fast, Octane is probably a good choice. If you want to go some photorealism, but maybe then another time you want to do something more cartoony, where you're not so concerned with all the lights and everything else being totally realistic, then Redshift might be a better tool for that job. So anyway, hopefully this has been helpful, and I will speak to you next time. Take care.